Hi everyone, this is Sarah from Hamilton. I'm almost back from my vacation, so by God's will and your prayers, you will soon see many more videos be produced on this channel on a more regular basis. I'm actually going to have some more to say on that in a few days, but I wanted to start to put my old articles to video, in part because that will enable me to actually keep them relatively short. If you enjoy the content on this channel and you want to support it on a regular basis, please consider becoming a patron. You can also do a one-time call for $25 through PayPal. Just see the details in the detail box. And you can also use the thanks button on this video if you want to support this channel on a one-time basis. But thank you all for just viewing, for participating in the discussion, and especially for your prayers. So, according to certain readings of the New Testament, grace, when biblically understood, is diametrically opposed to the idea of an active process of reception. To say that justification is by grace is taken, thus, to entail necessarily the exclusion of all human obedience from the instrumental reception of this grace, though not all human obedience in all things related to salvation or sanctification. But I think when we look at Paul's programmatic text for the justification of Abraham's children, we find that it demonstrates that this idea is an unbiblical notion of what grace or divine gift actually constitutes. Genesis 15 is about the covenant God makes with Abraham. God promises Abraham a family and a land for that family to inherit. Paul, in Romans 4, demonstrates that he is working with Genesis 15:6 in its entire context by describing Jesus as the instrument for the incorporation of Jewish and Gentile seed for Abraham, as well as identifying Jesus as the heir of the cosmic inheritance. Family and inheritance are the promises of Genesis 15 as they are in Romans 4. Recognizing the content of the divine gift as the land of inheritance, consider how the Bible speaks of Israel's reception of that gift. Recognizing that gift in Greek is the same root that is used for grace. The language of grace and gift-giving is never far from Moses' lips in Deuteronomy. Yet it is precisely in the context of the Creator's sovereign gift of land that Israel is called to participate by faith in the act of conquest, that is, in the act of possessing that gift. God has graciously given Israel the land. Now, if a monergistic gloss, that is, there's only one will involved, there's not two wills cooperating, but just one will. If a monergistic gloss on grace were implied by its biblical framing, this should be largely the end of the story in terms of grace's reception. Now, different Protestant commentators and theological traditions have different ideas about what degree of passivity is required in order to maintain consistency with the notion of divine gift. You can decide for yourself whether the idea that I'm setting forth as the Orthodox, and I think the Catholic idea to a large degree, is consistent with what you believe. But in Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, and Judges, it is the reception of God's free, gracious, and sovereign gift which is at stake in Israel's frequent failures of obedience. In key texts throughout the Torah, we find clustering of language dealing with faith and believing. Paul's interpretation of Genesis 15 in terms of justification by faith is rooted and grounded in a larger canonical reading of the Torah and the Tanakh as a whole. Genesis 15 is about Abraham's trust in God as the divine promise keeper. God has been faithful to Abraham in his journey so far, and Abraham firmly believes that God will continue to act faithfully. Notice the importance of faith language when God makes himself known through Moses to Israel. Exodus 4:5 describes the signs which Moses is to show to Israel, so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of your fathers, has appeared to you. Israel is called to believe in the revelation of the Lord through his prophetic servant. And indeed, it is at the crossing point out of Egypt that this language appears again. At the Red Sea crossing, Israel believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. Exodus 14:31. In Numbers 13-14, the Israelite spies behold the supernatural might of the Canaanite nations. And it is here that we see what a failure of covenantally active faith looks like. Fearing the might of these nations, Israel fails in its trust that the Lord is rock solid to fulfill the promises signed and sealed with that sacred name, the Tetragrammaton. The language of belief appears again in this context, when the Lord asks, "How long will they not believe in me, in spite of all the signs," notice that word again, "that I have done among them?" Numbers 14:11. Like Exodus 4 and 14, the grounds for trust in God are in his concrete revelation to and redemptive activity for Israel. Or, in New Testament language, we love God because he first loved us. 1 John 4:19. The intimate connection between faith and inheritance comes into view with Moses striking the rock in Numbers 20, when he was commanded to speak to the rock rather than to strike it. Because God's revelation to Moses has been so deep and so intimate, he was, I believe, the prophet nearest to God until the coming of Jesus himself, God's standard for the belief required of him were that much higher. Moses' whole lived experience for 40 years was one ongoing sign of divine presence. The Lord prohibits Moses from entering the land because you have not believed in me. Numbers 20:12. This is emphasized throughout Deuteronomy as the key to the inheritance. Now, Deuteronomy is all about gift. Just read through it and notice whenever this concept in this language is invoked. God freely gives what is not owed. Do not say in your heart that you've produced this wealth. It is God who gives of his treasury from heaven as a gift to Israel. Israel's land of inheritance is an act of divine grace through and through, and nothing less. Yet the scriptures do not understand this to be in any kind of dichotomous relation or tension with the notion of an active, vigorous reception of this gift. It is not merely that reception of the gift brings about obedience, or that obedience is coextensive with, that is, always exists alongside reception of the gift, but that obedience by the power of faith is the very instrument by which the covenantal gift is appropriated. The hand that embraces the divine hand of grace is an active hand by divine power. Consider how throughout Judges, the degree to which the tribes of Israel receive the very gift which the hand of grace has allotted them corresponds to their degree of obedient faith. In Judges 1:21, the tribe of Benjamin fails to drive out the Jebusites from Jerusalem. The Jebusites therefore exercise their corrupting influence on Benjamin on a continuous basis. This little failure of faith at the beginning of the tribe's history grows up, step by step, into the spiritual catastrophe that we read at the end of Judges in chapter 20, leading to Benjamin's almost complete annihilation. What we see here is what we read in Hebrews 11, and indeed throughout the New Testament. Why is faith the foundation for a life lived pleasing to God? Because it is faith which is the animating principle of obedience. As Paul says, the one who would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. Hebrews 11. Reception of those gifts promised by God is not passive, but it is an active, engaged process incorporating the life of the whole person. But it is rooted in faith because its animating principle is to trust that God will fulfill every word that he has promised. From faith proceeds love, and love does not merely demonstrate that faith exists, but brings faith to its purpose and its perfection.